What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. The other day I told a story about Kong. It was the second video I did about Kong, and it had to do with an incident that occurred between him and another dude from another ethnicity, right? And in that second video, I basically was talking about how one group's politics is not the business of another group's politics, right? And no group can push their own politics on another group. It doesn't work that way. It'll turn into something ugly pretty fast, right? And in the video, I gave an example of how in high desert, there were new flowers on the yard with Southerners and whites and blacks, and everybody was functioning. And when I talked about that, there was a Northerner that got in the comment section, and he said, how was that possible? And I told him, because that was Northerners' politics. The Southerners didn't know. They thought they were Northerners. The whites thought they were, like, everybody thought they were Northerners. Apparently, and look at these videos, like this topic, this is when I wish Josh from Homie Hangout was still around, because he would be able to piggyback and give an in-depth, right? So from what I learned later, apparently the New Flowers were a group that they didn't agree any longer with the politics of the North. What I'm not gonna get, you guys already know I'm not gonna get into. I only know superficial stuff when it comes to other groups, and even then it's not for me to just indulge in, right? But these dudes had broken away and created their own thing, right? But they did it on the main line, on GP. And, and the other groups didn't know whatsoever, right? And so I was telling the guy in the comments, I remember the first time I personally ever met a New Flower. And it was in 1999 in Pelican Bay Shoe. And we didn't know what he was. Later on, we found out, right? But it was a weird thing because the pod had, what was it? One white dude, and I believe everybody else was Southern and Northern. I don't believe there was any blacks in our pod at the time, right? And this guy comes, and he was on the last cell. And the Northerners, they didn't tell us anything other than, yeah, we don't mess with that dude. That was it. So if they don't mess with them, nobody else is going to. That's their people. Whatever it is, right? He never talked to anybody. I remember he was a tall, skinny dude. But what really stood out was, so a lot of people don't know because it didn't get the publicity that the later ones did. In 2000, there was a hunger strike. That was the first hunger strike. And that one only lasted 5 days. But everybody participated. In our building, I was in C10 at the time. And our building was one of the last buildings to find out about the hunger strike. It started and it initiated in D facility. The guys that were the guy that put it together, he was in D facility. So it had to go all the way from D facility, make it to C facilities. You see somebody at the specialty clinic, hey, hold on, check this out. This is what's happening. This is what day, woo, woo. So some of these other buildings had time to save up peanut butter or save up bread. Shit, not ours. We literally found out about it the day before, right? Hey, this is what's happening tomorrow. Refuse your trays. Until notified, refuse your trays, right? And I remember it was, we're going to go 5 days for sure. We may go 15, right? We'll let you know after the fifth day. And so sure enough, the next day, cops come in. Hey, you want your tray? Nah, I'm good. I ain't eating. Boom. They go down the line. They hit the last cell. And he's like, hell yeah, I want my tray. He ate, right? By day 3, the cops weren't even coming in. They weren't even they were coming in, but not with the cart. They would come in and just 5 days, right? 5 days, right? And we were like, how do they know? But they were aware that it was a minimum of 5 days. And what they did is they started popping out the new flower. They would pop his cell door because he wasn't participating, is what I'm getting at, right? And that's when we were like, what is this dude, eh? You know, like, they're not telling us he's no good. They're telling us they don't fuck with him, which in itself is that. But they're not saying nothing other than that, you know. So, but yeah, they would the cops would pop his door, man. And this dude would walk to the front of the pod, and they would give him an extra tray. Man, we're in there tired. We're in there hungry. And we're just watching this dude walk by the cell. And I remember my Sally said, I'm going to hit this dude with a dart tomorrow. Because we can make darts and, you know, you could hit dudes through the door. Anyways, and I remember my Sally said, hey, I'm going to hit this dude with a dart. And I remember other dudes were like, man, I'm darting this. Nobody did it. Nobody had the energy. People were tired. That's what happens when you go on a hunger strike. By the third day, the hunger pains go away, but your energy is low, right? And I remember I happened to have a couple peanut butters. And when I'm talking about peanut butter, it's like it's not even a cup. This is my headphone thing. It's not even a cup this big, right? And it's a little, like, you know that you got the ice cream scoops and you got the little tiny scoop? They give you one of those. Boom. That's your peanut butter. And I remember I used to cut it in 4 pieces. And like literally the little quarter piece I would eat of peanut butter and boom, I would feel the energy from that, right? And here we have this guy, while we're starving, this chump is going over there and grabbing a tray. Not just one, but 2. He's laughing at us. Cops are laughing at us. And we're just hungry. Anyways, that dude later, it was a southerner from Orange County. I had already left by then. I had gotten kicked back out. That's when I went back down to New Folsom the second time. But I stayed in contact with dudes that were in the shoe, obviously. And what happened was the cops, to me, it's never an accident. I don't ever believe any of those. When they crack doors like that, it's not an accident. I don't know what cop was mad at who, but they let the new flower out, and they let out a southerner from Orange County. So it went down on the tier, right? But that's another story, just another glimpse how nobody knew. Because I remember talking to other homies later, and they were like, oh, yeah, them new flowers, like, apparently they're no good. But, again, it goes back to that's their politics. And, you know, like when that whole thing with Kenny on B-Yard and all the Southerners that were there, and for someone to say, oh, because that one white dude was no good, all Southerners and all Crips, all Bloods and everybody else are no good, is the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. I remember being in New Folsom the second time, and when word came down that the whites on C facility where we were at were looked at in a bad light by their people in the Bay, and by their people on other yards, it isn't the business of any other faction to send their workers, their soldiers, to go clean up another group's trash. Because them white dudes that were on that yard, they weren't no punks. It was politics. Nobody ever said they had bad cases. Nobody ever said that they were telling or nothing like that. If I remember correctly, it had something to do with the whites and the northerners. That they felt the whites were supposed to do something to the northerners and they didn't do it. I don't know. Again, that's their thing, and that was a long time ago. But I wanted to address that whole thing where Southerners being on I think it was D facility. I don't know. Being in high desert with a New Flower. Nobody knew what they were. Not one faction on that yard knew what they were. And how would they? How could they? They dressed the same, had the same haircuts. They talked the same. They just, from one day to the next, they were there. Anyhow, that's my video for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them. I'm out of here.